This is Matt Miller. You're watching Chuck versus the podcast.
You are about to enter Chuck versus the podcast, the place for people who love Chuck and the people who work on Chuck. The only show that takes you behind the scenes with the stars.
Yvonne Strahovski.
Zachary Levi. Joshua Gomez.
Ryan McPartland.
Adam Balba.
Sarah Lancaster.
Interactive interviews.
Julia Ling.
Phil Clemmer.
All the cast.
Dixon High. Tony Hale. Scott Krinsky. Mark Christopher Lawrence.
Anita Friederici.
Fun hosts.
This is Mel. This is Liz. Now you can see how wacko we are.
The writers.
Ali Adler. Scott Rosenbaum. Zev Barrow.
The editors.
Matt Barber. Jeff Granville. Kevin Mock.
Contests.
We are giving away a Chuck press kit.
The directors.
Jason Ensley. Norman Buckley.
The guest stars.
Steve Austin.
Kristen Group.
The music.
This is Tim Jones.
Guest hosts.
I'm Kaylee from Toronto.
Conventions.
Lights come up, and here comes Jeffster out on stage.
Set visits.
This is the guy right here.
And much more. Are you ready? This is great.
This is Mel.
This is Liz.
And we want to welcome you to Chuck versus the Podcast, episode 48 for Saturday, April 3rd, 2010. You're going to love the episode today because we are able to bring you an exclusive interview that I had with writer and director and executive producer Matt Miller, who has brought us most recently Chuck versus the American Hero, which was a very great episode. We all loved it here on the podcast, and I'm sure you loved it too. So we decided to split the episode this week. We gave you one yesterday on Friday to announce the campaign of Chuck Declassified, and now we're going to bring you the interview. I hope you enjoy it. So I want to welcome writer Matt Miller to the podcast. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and you're not only a writer, but you're an executive producer on the show, and you're a director as well. That's
true. I am a director, although I haven't directed any Chuck.
Mm.
We talked about directing when we got the final 6 picked up this season, the extra 6, because we were really looking for directors, but it just didn't work out. I was really busy, and maybe next season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's take it back a little bit and talk a little bit more about your background. So,
sure.
You started out at USC?
I did. I went to. I didn't go to SC with Josh and Chris, but I did go to SC. I went to graduate school at SC.
What years were you at USC?
I was at USC. 93 to 95.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a producing program there called the Peter Stark program, which is not necessarily geared towards writers. It's about 25 people a year, graduate students. They're sort of motivated to be on the business end of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone there sort of just usually decides they would rather write.
Mm-hmm.
And so myself and a number of my classmates, I got a job when I graduated at Peter Stark, prestigious Peter Stark program, as a waiter in a restaurant. And just started writing. So it was a good experience for me to do it, and I would recommend it, but, it doesn't always necessarily lead. It's not like you graduate the Stark program and you automatically sort of get a job in some end of the business.
It's a little interesting because I might have actually met you. I was accepted to SC grad school in 94, and I visited the campus, was getting everything set up, and I actually couldn't get the money together for the international fees. So I ended up staying in Toronto.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's super expensive, and the other graduate programs, I think, are a lot better. The Peter Stark program is a very good program. It's a very prestigious program, but it depends on what you want to do. If you want to write or something like that, you're probably, maybe better off just writing.
Mm-hmm. So in 1996, you had a short film, Understanding Olivia, and you were producer, director, and actor on that one.
That was part of Peter Stark. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was still in grad school at USC, and I was only that was what started off as a weekend goof with myself and a friend of mine. We just decided that would be the big Peter Stark project, and Peter Cohen was a producer on it, who was a classmate of mine at SC, and my friend was the other actor. It was real professional organization over there.
Those were the days.
Yeah, it was wonderful. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now on IMDb, it jumps a little bit,
Mhm.
and it says that in '99 you were the creator of a series called Grown Ups. But what happened in between?
Well, 99 is probably when that show aired. Between 96 and 99, again, I finished up graduate school, and then I got a job as a waiter in a restaurant, and was writing like a novel and a bunch of other stuff, and was able to get a break where a script that I had written, I was able to sell, and then I got a job to write a movie for Fox, which got me out of the restaurant. And so I was able to, write for a living. Now, when you look on IMDb, they only have the produced credits. They don't have everything that you end up doing, along the way. And I'm sure everyone has, jobs, and maybe it's a script that you sold, or a TV pilot that you did, or a, book that you were adapting, or whatever it is. But the only things that are published on that website are the things that they actually end up shooting and airing and putting on somewhere. So yeah, I was working as a waiter, and then I sold this script and was able to get out of the restaurant. And then I was very, very fortunate and very naive, and was able to pitch a TV series with really no television experience,
Wow.
credits or knowledge of any kind. And I pitched the show, and it was supposed to be a 1-hour kind of dramedy about my friends and I, called The Grown Ups.
Mm-hmm.
And the network bought it and seemed happy with it. And then they called me one day and said, we really like the script. We have a couple of small changes. And the first thing was, can you change it from a half hour to 1 hour?
Oh my goodness.
And then they asked me to change it from single camera to multi-camera, which basically means a sitcom. And the last thing they said is, we have a piece of talent attached that we'd like you to sort of gear it towards. And I said, who do you have? And they told me that they had the artist formerly known as Urkel.
Okay.
Who's a gentleman named Julia White, a very nice young man. So that was my first foray into television. It was sort of, I don't know, it was like 27 or 28, maybe it was 29, somewhere in my late 20s, and I was running a television show knowing nothing about what I was doing.
Wow.
Which was a half-hour sitcom starring Julia White.
Wow.
We did that for a season, did 22 beautiful episodes of that.
Now, so that was sink or swim, and I guess you swam.
Yeah, exactly. My first hire.
I was a little interested. You worked with someone called Scott J. Rosenbaum on that one.
I did.
Is that the same Scott Rosenbaum that was on Chuck?
That is. Scott Rosenbaum was my roommate at the time.
Oh, you're kidding.
We both moved out here. Yeah, we moved out here together. We went to college together in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we moved out here together. And then when that show got picked up, I really had no idea what I was doing, and about 200 scripts arrived on my doorstep to hire writers to staff on the show. And so I turned to my roommate, Scott Skeeter, he goes by, and said, you want to work on the show? He said, sure. I said, you're hired. Start reading.
That's great.
And the two of us, with no experience, nothing to do, set out to hire the staff and put together that TV show. So yes, Skeeter Scott did work on that with me. That was our first time working together, or at least getting paid to. Mm-hmm. And then, years later, when Chuck came up, we started working together again.
That's great. Actually, he was on our most recent podcast.
Oh, perfect. There you go.
Yeah. Now, in between then and Chuck, you wrote and directed a romantic comedy, The Perfect You, is it Crazy Little Thing? I was a little confused by the
Crazy
title.
Little Thing was what someone, I don't know, one of the producers who sold it to whoever, they changed the title. I had nothing to do with that. But the title was Perfect You, and it was like $1 million independent movie that I wrote and directed. That was great. It was a blast, and I think you can get it on like Netflix. And it was a really wonderful experience. Did it in like 22 days or something like that in New York.
Great. And then you did a TV movie, Dynasty, The Making of a Guilty Pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. After the Perfect You, I had a meeting with ABC, and then I knew the producer was this guy named Greg Gugliotti, and so they wanted to do a kind of spoofy movie about the Dynasty. I had never really watched Dynasty growing up, or vaguely familiar with it. So I'd watched some episodes and sort of had this big, lofty idea that we could do Dynasty as sort of a metaphor for greed in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
So the whole thing sort of took place at the beginning of 80 and spanned sort of the 9 years or 10 years of the decade. It was 9 years, I think, that the show was on for, and had this sort of lofty aspirations that we're going to do that, and that was also a really wonderful experience. Worked with great people. We shot that actually in Australia for a few months.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great.
Was that at the same time as Las Vegas was happening, or did Las Vegas come after that?
No, I went on to Vegas sort of immediately after that.
And you were 2 or 3 years on Las Vegas?
That was 2 seasons on Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as a producer and a writer on that. I had been writing, I'd written some pilots for NBC, that sort of brass at NBC. And again, as you know, on IMDb, it's just like the things that are actually shot, but there's a lot of jobs in between. And I'd written 2 pilots for NBC that fall, and for a variety of reasons, they didn't happen. But they had said, "Hey, would you come work on the show Las Vegas?" And I'd never staffed on a show before, and I sat down with a guy named Gary Scott Thompson, who created the show, and Gardner Stern, who was the executive producer there. And they were nice enough to hire me, and went on and did that for 2 years. Got to work with James Caan.
Great.
Yeah, it was incredible. He was an incredible guy.
And then came Chuck. So tell me about your introduction to Chuck. Had you seen the pilot, or what stage did you come on?
Yeah, I'd seen the pilot. I saw it in the editing room with Josh Schwartz. During this whole time, I've known Josh for many years. In fact, Josh was one of the few people telling me not to do the grown-up show when they turned it into the Jaleel White sitcom.
Okay.
And we were real good friends, and we've been very good friends for a while. And him and I actually are doing a pilot as well right now, a sitcom.
Mm-hmm. That's Hitched?
Hitched, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But before that, we'd always been real good friends. And we talked about working together on a variety of things, and just nothing ever kind of worked out, or it was right, or for whatever reason. And so Chuck, seemed like a really good fit and a good thing for us to do. And so after they had shot the pilot, I went and screened it in the editing room. Thought it was just terrific. And so and then I had to meet Chris and met Mr. Fedak.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good. It was just all seemed like the right opportunity, the right time, and so we've had a blast doing it. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I'm just going to recap for the viewers. Of course, every writer's in the writer's room, but the scripts that you personally wrote were Chuck versus the Tango, Imported Hard Salami, The Seduction, The DeLorean, The Beefcake, The Colonel, which is a fan favorite, The Pink Slip, the first episode of the 3rd season, Nacho Sampler, and then most recently last week's episode, American Hero.
Yeah.
So definitely some great Chuck, and we don't have time to talk about all of those, but maybe what you can do is throughout the process you must have had either a favorite episode or a favorite moment. What kind of stories can you tell about the last couple of years? Maybe a scene that was cut that you loved, or just a taste from behind the scenes. Yeah,
well, it's first of all, it's a very collaborative medium. So we do sit in that writer's room all day, every day. And then different writers, and we break the story, and we really break it. Like every single beat is examined and discussed. And then, certain writers just go off and write them. It's always a very different process, because there's the one thing when you get the idea and it's up on the board. And there's another phase when you write it, and then there's another phase when you shoot it, and there's another phase when you edit it. And so sometimes things, come out better than you even thought they could. And sometimes, you sit in the editing room and say, I feel like we sort of left a little on the table here. Mm-hmm. And that happens, all the time. And it's a painful process where, when you realize, or you think something wasn't fully realized. But then there's also the side where you sit in the editing room and you think, wow, this thing came out great. And that happens a lot too. So it was really great. And I don't know if there was, I think that, again, some of these episodes came out really, really well. I think that the DeLorean was maybe an episode that I thought we maybe left a little on the table on that one. Mm-hmm. In terms of what it could have been. I thought the Colonel came out really well.
Yeah.
I was really happy with that. And Peter Lauer, who directed. And every time a new director or a different director comes in, there's always a different feel that they give to the show. So I think when I sat in the editing room for Colonel, even though, sometimes you sit in there and some scenes aren't working, but the material's there to shape them. And there was just so much epic just storytelling that was happening in that episode in terms of, Captain Awesome learning about Chuck, who at that time was, now there's been other characters, but at the time it was the first person outside the immediate circle of Casey and Sarah to find out who it was. And, there was a near hookup with Chuck and Sarah, and then Chuck needed to intersect out of his head. So there was a lot of, things in favor for that episode. It had a lot of big epic moments and just sort of always knew that thing was going to be big and cool and epic. And then there's, like The Door and a smaller story about Sarah's father coming, or I actually liked a lot The Seduction. I liked, we all, as a show and as a staff, and, we all really loved the Roan Montgomery character.
Oh, yeah.
And he was someone that we had sort of had in mind for a while. And even, when we were picketing during the strike in between the first and second season, we'd be walking the strike line and talking about Roan Montgomery and how we wanted to get back in there and create him. And, and then and I think John Larroquette did a wonderful job, but you have a variety of ideas of who you want to play that part and how you want all that to turn out. But I do think that episode came out nicely. But, it's always a little different, the script to stage.
Well, and you have at least the privilege that your writing offices are literally on the same, like just down the hall from the editing suites, and you're just a few minutes walk away or on those golf carts to where they're shooting. I mean, I know there's some shows that shoot in one city and are written in a completely different city.
I'd be willing to bet our editors would like to be very far away from us. I'm sure they would prefer to be in Vancouver if at all possible. But, it's great for us because you can pop in there constantly. And we're always, even before, the edit's even been made, we're always sort of sniffing around the editing room asking the editors how to come out. And sometimes they're honest with you, and sometimes they lie because they don't want to because they know if they tell you it's not turning out so good. You always can fix it in the editing room. But even if, then you'll get particularly neurotic and you'll just keep pestering them all day with other questions. What doesn't work? What do we need to do? Do we need to reshoot anything?
Yeah. Well, and I love the pickup lines too. I know when I was there in September, I saw some early cuts, and it was funny to hear everybody's voices in the cuts. What I'm saying is like the editor's voice instead of Chuck and Sarah.
You realize, you need a line here, a line there, and you have them say it in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Then we'll get the real actors to come in during the looping process and put their own voices in. But for a while, you have whatever assistants standing in the hallway. You drag them in, and they have to say the words. Yeah, it's a fun process.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to American Hero. I mean, that was just aired last week, and of course you've written one or two since then.
Yeah. Let's see. American Hero was I wrote again with 12. I co-wrote that with Phil Klemmer and Max Denby. I actually did all my writing this season was in a co-variety.
Oh, all the writing, really?
Yeah, I had a very tough year, so I was, I had another kid, and I was writing 2 pilots and doing the show. So I co-wrote as much as was reasonable. Yeah. So I co-wrote the first one with Chris Vidak, and then I co-wrote the 6th one, which was the Nacho Sampler with Scott Rosenbaum. And then co-wrote 12 with Phil Klemmer and Max Denby, and Max is our writer's assistant.
Oh, okay.
So it was good for him to get his first produced credit where he got on that episode. And then he ended up co-writing another episode later for us in the season. And then I co-wrote episode 18, which is the second to last episode, with Ali Adler and Phil Klemmer.
Great.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the process then of co-writing. So when you co-wrote American Hero with Phil, did you trade off scenes, or did you pass drafts to each other, or
yeah,
how?
Well, you do a little. I mean, it depends on the situation and the circumstances, how much time you have. I think usually what you end up doing, or what we do on the show is, you sort of divvy up the acts. You do it by acts. Someone will take the first 3, someone will take the last 3, or someone will take the first and the second and the fifth, and someone will take the second, third, and fourth. However you want to do it. You divvy up the acts and you both write them, and then you sort of pass your acts back and forth and allow the other person to, give notes or give thoughts or do some writing on those acts as well.
Well, it's great that you guys have been working together for so long, because you have the tone and you have. You would never know that you guys were writing different acts.
Right. You got to make sure everyone's nailing the voices, but by season 3, it's we've all been there since the first season, so it's not like hasn't been too many changes in the writing staff. So it's been a pretty tight group, and we all kind of have the same tone and voice for what we want the show to be. So it makes it easier, that process, where someone's not writing a completely different show.
Mm-hmm. And so originally episode 12 was supposed to be setting up the finale, which was going to be episode 13.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about number one, how that might be different than just the run-of-the-middle episode, setting up the finale, and then all of a sudden finding out that NBC was ordering another 6, and did you have to retool?
Yeah, it was a very big challenge, because we had designed the season around blowing it out with 13, where 13 was sort of right off into the sunset kind of a moment. And then when they added new episodes, we were in the middle of 13 was just kind of coming off the board, so it had been sort of broken. And then to add 6 more is tough, because you don't want people to feel like, the season ended at 13, now what? Mm-hmm. So we ended up paring back some of the things we wanted to do in both 12 and 13.
Oh, I see.
So it didn't feel like such a climax. They still felt like big, important episodes, but it didn't necessarily feel like it was all over. All the stories had been tied up, and all the loose ends and all of that sort of stuff. So we had a bigger version of 12 and 13 that we wanted to do, that we had to pare down a little bit so it didn't feel like the season was over.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very strong episode. It was very well received by the fans. Great job on that one. Are there any stories in particular you can tell about that episode? Things that might have been a challenge, or things that were fun to do?
Yeah, well, it's always the stupid things that people hopefully won't tell when they watch it, but it's a location that was difficult, or something that didn't look as good as we wanted to, or we didn't have the pieces. The restaurant scene where Chuck interrupts Shaw's dinner with Sarah, and then you've got the guys in the van, and then you've got Morgan, and he makes the crank phone call, and then the police show up, and the ring shows up, and all of that kind of chaos. That was the hardest part of that episode to get right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it required, because there were so many pieces, and some of the pieces they weren't able to get, because this season we've been shooting the episode in 1 fewer days than we had last season.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. So they just couldn't get all the pieces. So we were really struggling till the very last minute. We had to go in and shoot some extra stuff, some extra angles and things like that. So you had all the parts to make that sequence work.
Wow, well, it's really seamless on screen.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's the dream. The dream is that no one knows how hard you worked on it.
Yeah, well, and actually in particular, I noticed that this episode had a lot of location stuff. It was a lot less. I know Scott Rosenbaum, when he was on last week, he talked about how Chuck versus the Beard, he had a what do you call it, a bottle episode where he had to do almost everything on set. Yeah. This seemed like the opposite. Like there was a lot that was outside of the regular sets.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. In 12, because when it was originally conceived, it was supposed to be the second to last episode. I mean, there was a version of 12 at one time that took place in Paris.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was definitely a different take on it. But like the restaurant that they had dinner in, and that we threw our awesome go through the window and tackled Shaw and all that. That was on the lot. That was on the Warner Brothers lot. So even though it's not on our set, it was still on the Warner Brothers lot.
Okay.
But some of the other locations, like the warehouse and some of the ring stuff, was off the lot. So yes, that episode 309, the Beard, was what we call a bottle episode, which is once or twice a year. You end up having to do, and the idea is hopefully the audience wouldn't know that this is why it's happening. But for budget reasons, you have to shoot a whole episode just on your sets, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so we did the Beard this year. Last year we did an episode where someone drove a car into the Buy More.
Oh, the Christmas one.
The Christmas episode, and if you notice, that mostly all takes place on our sets.
Yeah.
because, just the nature, you got to eventually sort of catch up money-wise somewhere. I think season 1 we did an episode called The Marlin, where there was a break-in to buy more.
Right.
Stole the Marlin and all of that. So you try and create storylines that could take place, in the Buy More or on your sets.
Well, the funny thing is, those are some of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, it's good. It because what happens with those episodes are, and the reason that they always come out very good is because they have to be about character, and because they can't be, it's not, we found the ring compound and we're infiltrating, and all of that stuff, which is important and necessary to moving the story forward. But I think the stuff that always resonates the best for audiences is when it comes back and it's just about the people and the characters, and you're learning new things about your characters and things like that.
Well, I should save money more often.
But exactly.
Yeah,
it's tough. You can't. They're very hard to break those episodes.
Yeah,
they take a lot of time in the writers' room on them because it's very tricky how to keep telling a story while you're just in one location or two locations.
Yeah, that's going to wrap up the Chuck part.
Great.
But your work on Hitched is done, or are you still continue to work on that?
No, we're not. We haven't even shot it yet. So
okay.
We're just about to start that. We've written the script, and we're in the casting process now, and we're pretty much all cast. Just one or two very small, one role that needs to be cast, and then a couple of real small roles. But one of the sort of main ensemble we're still casting, and then we start on Monday with what they call the table read, and then we sort of rehearse it all week next week, and then we shoot it the following week.
Great. And so now, is that something that's planned to go into series, or is that just a TV movie, or how does that work?
Well, the way they do pilots is they shoot some pilots, and then they basically decide what they're going to air when their pilots have come in, and they decide which of their old shows aren't going to be returning, which ones are going to be returning, how many slots they have, what programs fit well with those. So we won't know if it's going to be on in the fall until like mid-May. Mm-hmm. So it's for CBS, is the network. Yeah. And it's a sitcom, and it's in the vein of How I Met Your Mother, which is a good, successful show for them. So
okay.
Sort of like that, and we'll see. We'll have to see how it comes out.
Yeah. So, and what are your plans for after that?
After that, some sleep, a lot of sleep, and then I'll have to see if Hitched gets picked up. Then I'll be working on that, possibly returning for Chuck for a 4th season or something different.
Wow.
We don't know. Future is uncertain.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a couple of young kids. And,
no, it's okay. Thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. If we can get any publicity we can get for the show right now, it would be great.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you
listen,
for...
I appreciate it. I thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks for giving us a great thing to do on Monday nights.
Oh, beautiful. Terrific.
Yeah.
Keep watching.
Okay, so best of luck to you.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we're back. And again, what a privilege it is that we're able to have the writer of the episode this week on the podcast. Just great timing that it worked out that way. And great to talk to Matt.
He's so gracious with his time. We really appreciate it. And it's exciting to get to hear from him when we're on such a high from this good episode. Mm-hmm. We want to also thank our sponsors, Movie Morons, which is a podcast about all things film and is not moronic in the least. You can find them at moviemorons.com. And we also want to thank our other sponsor, SerienJunkies.de, which is the largest television fan site in Germany. If you are a German speaker or reader, you should stop by SerienJunkies.de and catch up on all the latest news about your favorite TV shows, including Chuck.
So that's really all we've got until Chuck comes on Monday. Please watch Chuck live. Make sure you remember the Chuck Declassified campaign that we've got going. Check back to chucktv.net for all the latest details on the campaign for renewal news and that kind of thing. And have a great Chuck week. Check back with us next week for our podcast talking about what was going to be the finale, episode 13. Thanks a lot.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.